Hello and welcome to Pots and Trowels with me, Martin, joined by Sean
Hello.
and Jill.
Hi.
And it's sunny, so we're out in the garden once more. It's nice to
We
get
are.
this
We've
bit
got to
of
make the
light.
most of it.
You might hear a bit of wind, but it's
Yes.
it's nice.
Well, we're going to be finding all sorts of things in the programme this week, including a visit I made up to Scotland to have a chat with the curator of Logan Botanic Gardens.
And up there in Scotland, you'll get to find out why part of Scotland is a bit like North Vietnam, which sounds a bit strange, but keep listening, you'll find out about that. Remember, if you've got a question for Martin or the team, drop us an email, info@potsandtrowels.com.
And we have got a question from Jim about rhododendrons, so we'll listen to that one later on. But first, you disappeared without me, Martin, didn't you? So let's find out what you got up to at Logan Botanics with Richard.
Richard, we're sitting in the beautiful garden here at Logan Botanic Garden, but before we talk about the garden, tell me, how did your journey start? How did you get into horticulture and become the curator of this amazing garden?
So my father was a passionate horticulturist. He loved gardening. He spent his life in the garden outside. And my earliest recollection of gardening is pruning roses when I was 6 years old. My father showed me how to do it. And I was on my Easter holidays, and I can remember I started, and I just kept on going till I pruned about 300 roses. So my first recollection is doing that in Preston, where I was born. And then at the age of 10, I moved to Cobra, and we had a large house with a large 12-acre garden, which encompassed vegetables, fruit trees, mixed borders. And the house, which ultimately became a hotel, my parents had less time to spend in the garden, and I guess I inherited spending a lot of time in the garden and just taking it from there.
So when you left school, did you know that horticulture is what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I was always interested in plants. I guess chlorophyll was in my veins from an early age. And, all holidays, evenings, I spent pruning apple trees, roses. When I was in my teenage years, I used to show a lot and exhibit at local flower shows. Then during the latter teenage years, growing a few plants and shrubs for sale. And so, once I left school, it was a no-brainer. I went and did a practical year's experience at a nursery, honed in on my propagation skills, and then went to Free School of Gardening in Castle Douglas.
Right, okay. And what happened after that? How did you get to be where you are now?
So after Free, I was fortunate to get a scholarship to travel to America, to Longwood Gardens, America's most prestigious show garden on the East Coast, just outside Philadelphia, where I spent a year. I learnt how to do jobs really properly if you had as much money as you needed to spend on an appropriate task. It was a really great way to learn how a job should really be done. So I was there for a year, and then did 3 years further training at the Marrow Botanic Gardens in Kew in London, which exposed me to a different type of climate. I was used to a much more northerly climate, much cooler, but down in the southeast, hot and dry. So I was down there for 3 years, and then once I had enough of cities, I had to get back to my roots and return to Scotland.
Okay. And is that when you came here to Logan?
Yeah, so I did about 8 years as lecturing and then head of department at Barony College in charge of forestry, horticulture, schools. I'm always very interested in educating young people. And in 2007, a job as curator came up at Logan, which was absolutely perfect for me. It was all about exotic plants from the Southern Hemisphere, working with young people, try to make real theatre about using exotic plants, palms, tree ferns, proteas, all this type of material. And we've ended up, contributing and being a custodian of Logan as it is today.
Yeah, and you have got a fantastic knowledge of those sort of tender trees and shrubs and perennials through your travels and your studies, because you are a member of the RHS Tender Ornamental Plant Committee. I think you're our most northerly member, but you create this fantastic collection here, so all that expertise is valuable to our committee and a valued member. So what we're going to do, we're going to just take a little break now, then we're going to come back and find all about your work that you do here at Logan and all the lovely collections and going around the world and collecting plants. So we'll join you back in a minute.
Fantastic. Look forward to it.
So, come on then, what were you doing up in Bonnie, Scotland then?
Well, I was up there for 3 days with the RHS, for those that don't know, is the Royal Horticultural Society Tender Ornamental Plant Committee. So the RHS has various plant committees, and I happen to chair one of them. So we went up there with loads of committee members, and we've got some very, very clever people on our committee, far, far cleverer than me. I just get the job of herding them together. And we went to visit Glasgow Botanic Gardens. We went to Thrieve, which is a great training garden owned by the National Trust. But the highlight was Logan Botanic Gardens, of which Richard, who is one of our committee members, is the curator. And it was fantastic. We went, I think you were with me, Jill. We went when we did our Scottish garden holidays
That's a
years
long
ago,
time
20
ago.
plus years ago,
Yeah.
before Richard was there. And I can remember bits of it, but I didn't really remember how big and how impressive it was. I was blown away by it.
And well, one of the things I thought was really interesting, apart from the fact that he was the least Prestonian person I've ever heard before, and that's come from somebody who lived in the area and went to college in the area, and my sister still lives in Preston, so
Yeah.
you know. But the breadth of places he's been to, you know, America, and then worked at Kew, but the American garden sounds really interesting. What do we know about that?
It does. Well, I did a little Google actually after I heard about it. Longwood Gardens in Philadelphia, and it just looks absolutely fantastic. The founder was somebody called Pierre Dupont, and he obviously had this vision. And it's over 200 acres. There are 6. They call them districts rather than different types of gardens. So it ranges huge variety, but one of the districts is the Fountain Garden, which is very formal and quite well manicured, and then sort of the other extreme is the Meadow and Forest District, for instance, which has grand sweeping vistas and is much more natural. And there's a huge glass house as the centrepiece of the gardens, which was built in the 19th century, early 19th century, which has both formal and contemporary displays. But the pictures on the internet just look fantastic. And the Fountain Garden, I'll give you a bit of fascinating facts here. It has 1,719 jets of water, and they do these big displays, sort of water
a bit like
displays.
in Vegas.
They illuminate it as well. I think it's more, probably, I wouldn't say more tasteful than Vegas, but that's maybe not the right word to use. But 5 miles of pipes for the water to go through as well, and the stunning displays. And I think they have musical evenings and concerts. And so, yeah, I think we need to put that on our list.
Yeah, yes.
Could we do that as a Pots and Trowels video?
Field trip.
Yeah.
An outside broadcast.
Yeah.
We need somebody from Philadelphia. I can only think of Rocky in Philadelphia. Is it Rocky was Philadelphia?
Oh,
was
I don't know,
in
yeah.
there.
Well, I know of the Philadelphia
Yes,
Flower
think you're
Show,
right.
which is a very famous flower show. It's sort of like the Chelsea Flower Show of the United States, because I've got a friend that judges there regularly. So if anybody from the Philadelphia
Yes.
Flower
If you're
Show
listening,
is
yeah.
you need a senior RHS judge, I could be available.
And top cameraman, of course.
Yeah, we all need to go. And the
And
producer.
hanger on.
Yeah. We all need to go. We all need to
Sandwich maker.
go. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, we'll be there. No, it was good. I mean, it's great experience he's had working in those places. You know, he must have learnt so much there, and just to be able to go to a garden like that and
One
learn.
of the things he said, and I don't know how much he meant by this, but he mentioned about learning how how you do things when money's not an issue, because presumably budgets people are budget conscious in their own
huge.
gardens, but RHS gardens, all these different gardens have to think about that. I mean, I'm sure you've been to gardens where it's volunteer run and they don't have enough volunteers.
Exactly,
And,
yeah.
you know, I can't imagine a garden that's just got no worries about budgets.
No, exactly. Whether it's still the same now from when Richard was there, but yeah, it must be. It's obviously a big garden. Money's no object, which is great. You can then get that excellence in horticulture that we all want to see.
Fantastic. Coming up, we'll have a listener's question, and I think we've got a little recipe coming up.
We have, yeah.
But just remember, if you've got a question for Martin or the team, drop us an email, info@potsandtrowels.com, or drop a comment on our videos or wherever you're watching or listening or whatever. Pots and Trowels, we're waiting for your questions, aren't we?
Well, Jim has sent us in a question, and I know you're going to be talking about rhododendrons in Logan Garden,
Yes, they've got
aren't
a
you?
fantastic
in the
collection
next
there.
bit
Where's
of the
Jim
chat.
from?
I had no idea where Jim's
Massachusetts, isn't it?
Is that near Philadelphia?
No, near Boston.
I'm just thinking, we could probably have got a bit of B&B there.
Well, yeah, we could make it a 3-centre holiday, couldn't we?
Road trip.
Stop with Jim's, check on his rhododendrons. Have you? Oh, thank you. I'll try not to eat it. Jim has an established rhododendron, but unfortunately, they obviously had a lot of snow where he was last year in the winter because it split, the weight of the snow split the rhododendron. So he wants to know if it will survive being split, but also could it be dug up and divided? Would that be the best thing to do with it?
Okay, good question. And thank you for the photograph as well, Jim, because that makes it so much easier. So to describe it, this is quite a mature rhododendron. So it's got quite large trunks at the base, multi-stemmed, coming from ground level, and as Jim says, it's split. So half the branches have literally split one way and half the other. So it's sort of come apart at ground level.
Right.
And it's not uncommon, and I'm sure that is the weight. I don't think digging it up is a solution. I think because of its age and it looks quite large, I think you'd have a problem doing that anyway, Jim. You could do a little bit of pruning on the top if you wanted to reduce the weight, pulling it down. Or the other thing you could do is if you could find something to bind it, some strapping, something that's probably got a little bit of give in it, you could probably tie those base stems together just to hold them
like
firm.
What could you use some bandage?
Sort of like the webbing you have to hold
things
like
onto
trailer.
roof racks and things.
That
sort
thing.
of
Just something that's got maybe a little bit of give in it. It's not you don't want wire that will cut into it, so it's got to be soft. But maybe just bind that together, just a couple of loops around, just to stop it splaying out. Because very often where there is a cut on a branch, if you can hold it together for long enough, it heals over, it calluses over.
Okay.
So I think that would just give it that
try.
little bit of stability, and maybe a little bit of pruning after it's flowered, just to take a bit of the weight off the canopy. But I think it will survive. I think, in the wild it would probably split further, fall apart, but as long as there are roots attached to both those parts, it will live. So I wouldn't worry too much, but let us know what you do with
and
it.
I guess prevention is key, isn't it, really, if you can, but it depends how heavy the snow is, doesn't it, really? If it's completely covered, you could go years and years without anything, one snowfall, and the weight just pushes it down. So it's what happens to mature plants.
Yeah, and rhododendrons can get, I haven't seen the picture, but I mean, I'll have a look at it because we'll definitely put it on the video for the YouTube version of this, but they can get very large, can't they? I mean, they're known as, were they known as kind of the royal plant or something like this, or am I making it up?
You might not be making it up.
They used to be in kind of like very large regal gardens at the, I'm kind of making it.
And there's a clue in the name because rhododendron is Latin for tree. So, they're not a small bush. Some of them are, but some of them do get huge. Absolutely, yes, you're right, Sean.
Okay.
Bit of botanical knowledge from Sean there this week.
I don't know about that. My memory of rhododendrons is at my grandparents' house, they had a large one at the bottom of a lawn and we used to just go inside it. It was so large, and make dens and run around and hide and stuff. So lots of fun. There's more to hear about rhododendrons in the next part, so let's go back up to Bonnie, Scotland.
So 18 years here as curator. I think when I first came to Logan, this is only my second visit, I'm ashamed to say, and it's probably over 20 years ago, so you wouldn't have been here. But when I came through the little archway where the cottages and the tea room now, I instantly recognised it. But we've been round today looking at sort of the periphery of it, and it's much bigger than I remembered, and a huge collection of plants. So, what sort of things did you do when you came here as curator? Because as a new curator, I suppose you want to do a few changes and put your mark on it. So what was the first thing you did when you came here?
So I guess one of the earliest projects we did was to plant up the Tasmanian Creek. The previous curator had been involved in field work on an expedition to New Zealand and Australia, and our Tasmanian Creek was filled with plants like melaleucas, different Dixonias, Dianellas, eucalyptus, planting all these out, and now 18 years later, some of these eucalyptus are 30 foot high, the tree ferns are taller than you and I, Dianellas produce these lovely translucent violet fruits every autumn. Things have really grown. Projects like that, projects like, the drive, which was formerly grass panels on either side, has now got an exotic Cabbage Palm Avenue with nearly 400 cabbage palms down there. We're trying, a lot more plants. We're being more adventurous with climate change. Hardy palms, we've got about 16 or 18 different species outside. And, you might not believe this, but we're actually growing and flowering Proteus. Proteus cynaroides, the national flower of South Africa, outside, and it's thriving.
So for any people that don't know where Logan is, you're in Scotland, and people think Scotland, it's north, it's cold, it's frosty, long winters, but you have a very special climate here. So do you want to explain what your climate's like in Logan?
Yeah, Scotland often think of being a very wet country. We actually get about 35 to 40 inches of rain, which is okay. The actual climate at Logan is very like St Ives in Cornwall. We're a little bit cooler during the summer, but during winter we probably get about 3 to 4 frosts, maybe -2. So some parts of the garden are never ever exposed to a frost. We get quite strong winds, but we get very good sunlight. We very rarely get a late or an early frost, and it's amazing. You can walk around Logan on a Christmas day and get big bunches of fuchsias, proteas, lovely foliage from tree ferns, which you just wouldn't expect. So it's quite amazing.
And is that all because you're sort of affected by the Gulf Stream? Is that what controls your weather?
Yeah, very much affected by the Gulf Stream. Logan is essentially a bit like an island. There's sea on 3 sides, and so we get very, very warming currents coming right up. I mean, at its closest point, it's about 1/4 of a mile from the sea, so we're very, very close. And as an example, during the very hard winter in 2010, there's a picture on one of the major newspapers in the UK, and the actual peninsula of the South Rins is the only area in the whole of the UK which didn't have snow.
Really? I remember that year because we were in North Yorkshire then, and we were down to -17 and lots of snow. So that maritime climate here makes it mild, hence the reason you can grow all these wonderful plants from New Zealand and Tasmania and Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Logan focuses on plants from Mediterranean parts of the world, places like Chile, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia. As an example, North Island, New Zealand, the black tree ferns, Cyathea medullaris, they're about 4 or 5 metres in the garden tall now. These are plants which you would very, very rarely see other than the very west of Cornwall growing outside in the UK. So we're very lucky.
You are. And I know you've been on sort of plant hunting expeditions, and you're very keen on introducing plants from Vietnam into the garden, which is something you've written about as well. So why Vietnam? What's the link between plants growing in Vietnam and here in this part of Scotland?
Yeah, surprisingly enough, the climate of North Vietnam up in the mountains and Logan is very, very similar. My 18 years here, I've only ever known probably on 2 occasions, maybe an inch of snow. The temperatures aren't quite as hot as they are in northern Vietnam. But the plants, do really well. Plants like polyspora, lots of evergreen magnolias, lots of rhododendrons, camellias. They all grow in very similar climates. And a lot of it is trial and error. They are absolutely thriving. And the difference is because of the high altitude. The mountains in northern Vietnam rise to 13,200 feet. So that gives them, the similarities in climate.
Yeah. And you love your rhododendrons as well, don't you, of course?
Yeah, there's so many great rhododendrons, and rhododendrons at this moment in time have had some really bad publicity. That people say that they only flower for a short amount of time, that they're taking over our countryside. Well, there are about 1,500 species of magnolias, of rhododendrons, and only one of them is rampant. And you can get rhododendrons to flower any month of the year. Many of them have lovely flowers, bark, lovely leaves with interesting indementum on the underside of the leaves. So they offer so much more. And there's large ones which grow into trees, some which are only a few inches high. So there's something for everyone with rhododendrons. It isn't just about Rhododendron ponticum. Rhododendron, the genus, is so much more.
Yeah, they are amazing plants. And most of them are fairly tough and hardy anyway, so you can grow them most places in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, an awful lot of rhododendrons, as in northern Vietnam, come from the tops of mountains. As an example, Rhododendron sinofalconeri, which is quite rarely seen, is a beautiful yellow tree-like rhododendron, goes to about 15, 20 feet high often, sometimes even a lot more. But this is a great plant. It has lovely bark, amazing attractive leaves, beautiful butter yellow flowers, and it's quite hardy because these are mountainous plants, so are really good garden plants.
Yeah. So the garden, you've got the more formal parts with the lovely mown lawns and the really colourful seasonal tender bedding, which is one of your specialities, out into the woodland. So how big is the garden in total, Richard?
So the garden in total is 25 acres in size and is maintained by 6 dedicated and passionate gardeners and myself. And, we're focusing on plants here from Australia, New Zealand, South America, South Africa and the Atlantic Islands, parts of the world which have similar Mediterranean-type climates.
Yeah. And open for most of the year or part of the year?
Yeah, so we open for weekends in February as part of our Snowdrop Sundays, and then open daily from the 1st of March until the 15th of November. And because of the mild climate, even in March you can see giant magnolias or lots of rhododendrons, or in the latter part of October, see Banksias or Proteas in flower. So you'll see lots of really lovely flowers which you wouldn't expect to see and rarely seen outside in the UK.
Yeah, no, I mean, your collection is fantastic. I'm not even going to ask you how many different plants here, because you probably don't know, but I would think it's thousands and thousands and thousands of different genus and species, isn't it? It's got to be.
Yeah, well, I can give you a rough figure. I think when I came to Logan in 2007, we had about 900 species, and I think now we're getting beyond about 2,700 species. So we've really added a lot of material from all parts of the globe. A lot of our material comes from expeditions. I mean, I'm fortunate myself to have been to likes of China, to Chile, to Vietnam, Canary Islands, looking for plant material which would do well here. And, many of these plants are really threatened in their wild status. So Logan's role as a botanic garden is conservation of the genetics of these plants.
Yeah, and I know you're a great plant lover, but one of the plants you grow at home, which you've got some here as well, but you've got a big collection of monkey puzzle, haven't you, in your own garden?
Yeah, monkey puzzle is becoming, it's such an iconic plant, firstly, and in its native habitat in Chile, becoming less and less common all the time, just due to climate change and pressures, expansion of agriculture, for example. So, each of us can do our own little bit. In my little bit at home, I have about 50 specimens which have grown from seed, sown about 2005, about 25 to 30 foot high. This is me doing my own little bit for conservation. They're such a beautiful plant, really iconic. You couldn't mix them up with anything else. Hopefully the next generation will enjoy all the fruits of my labours, and including the pinion nuts, and they will preserve the species for years to come.
Yeah, well, you're doing your own little bit, as you say, at home, but you're doing an awful lot here at Logan as well. So, true plant collector and conserver. Richard, thank you very, very much for taking us around today. It's been an absolute pleasure going around the gardens with you, the curator, because you know every plant's name as well, some I've never heard of. So it's been a real education. So thank you for it.
Thank you, Martin. Much enjoyed it.
So hang on a minute, a monkey puzzle tree collection. I'm thinking this is a bit of a busman's holiday. You've got to have a pretty decent patch of land to collect monkey puzzles, haven't you? They are the big trees that I'm thinking they are, aren't they?
Absolutely, those iconic trees. I mean, as I think Richard said, they're one of the easiest ones to identify, aren't they, really? I didn't realise there were so many species within the genera, and he did say how many it's got. But yeah, I think he's got 10 acres of land where he lives. So he lives about an hour away from Logan. I think he lives near Threave on the way to Dumfries, and he's building up this collection. They are his passion. So maybe one day that's another visit for us.
Well, yeah. But how long do they take to grow, monkey puzzles,
they're not fast
on average?
growing,
No,
they?
they're not. That's what I was just
slow.
thinking.
And I don't know whether all of them, because the monkey puzzle we all sort of see in gardens that the Victorians planted a lot. I mean, they're South America, Chile. Now, whether they're all South American plants, I'm not sure. But no, it'd be interesting to see it and what the difference is.
I just think that feels like a bit too much of a busman's holiday to me. I mean, you like to have a nice garden, and gardening is what you do, and you want to come home to a nice garden, but that's surely a lot of work as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and maintaining a collection. He's probably got the biggest collection of monkey puzzles in the UK. So whether that is something that he will open one day, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see.
Keep watching this space. And the other thing, I mean, obviously we heard a lot about some of the kind of tropical varieties of things that were growing, including some South African and Vietnamese kind of strains of plants, or types of plants. I mean, is that unique to that part of Scotland then?
Well, no, I mean, I think, as Richard said, everybody associates Scotland with being cold and wet and frosty, but where they are on that southwest tip, I mean, they're sort of, I think they're that part is the most southerly part of Scotland, and it's surrounded by the sea, so it's got that maritime climate, and the Gulf Stream brings the warm air in off the Atlantic, so that's why they rarely get frost. They get a lot of rain. It is wet. I mean, when we were there with the committee, and this was mid-August, you could have been in February. Right. I mean, it was cold. There was a storm out on the Atlantic, obviously, and it was horizontal rain. It was unbelievable. Richard took us to a nearby lighthouse as a little bit of just something after we'd done the garden, and it was sort of hanging on to everybody to have a photograph taken, because otherwise we'd have blown away.
I think there's a little clip of video on the Potting Shed stage Instagram, isn't there, of that? So do go and check that out if you get chances. Yeah.
But it's the mild that's the important thing. So I think when it is sunny, they are in a very bright. It's really bright light when the sun does shine. It's just that this year they've had a very wet. The whole west of Scotland has been very wet this summer.
Because there was also discussion about it being, in that harsh winter of 2010, there not being no snow there. Right. When the entire rest of the UK got snow, it was very, very cold. My memory of going to Scotland, I went skiing with my brother there once, and people talk about 4 seasons in one day. I think I got 4 seasons in one photograph. Up near in the Cairngorms, I took a photograph, and on the left it was blue sky, in the middle it was rain, and on the right it was snow, and it was quite an interesting experience.
But it's worth a visit. Anybody up in that sort of southwest Scotland, go and have a look. I mean, there's a part of it is their Tasmanian garden where all the lovely tree ferns were, and Jill and I went to Tasmania 6, 7, 8 years ago, and we could have saved a fortune flying to Tasmania, because we could have driven up to Scotland, because it was like walking through a wooded glade in Tasmania. So beautiful.
Yeah, and you saw the rhododendrons as well, because obviously we were chatting about rhododendrons in the first part of this podcast. But they are a bit out of style at the moment, aren't they? They're out of fashion. But I think, it maybe in a few years' time they're going to be the next big thing, aren't they?
I mean, obviously they weren't in flower when we were there. The time to get them is in spring, sort of March, April, May time is their time. And Richard is also passionate about rhododendrons. He's got a huge collection there, and he's always collecting seed and growing more. And they come from very small ones, just a few feet tall, to 50, 60 feet tall in a whole range of colours. So it would be worth going back in the spring just to see the camellias and the rhododendrons and all the spring flowering plants that are there.
Somewhere else to put on the travel list.
Put it on the list.
We need to be on tour, P&T on tour. Sean, you're in charge of budgets.
Oh yeah. I'll see what I can do. Marley, have you got any spare money? We've got some things we need to be doing in the garden at the minute. I mean, obviously, the usual trail, just to remind you, if you've got any questions, drop us an email, info@pots&trowels.com. But what should we be doing right now?
Well, here we are now. It's the end of September, and which is our autumn in the UK. So it's a time to sort of make sure you're getting all the harvest out the vegetable garden. So if you are growing potatoes, for example, within the next week or two, get them out before we get those really heavy autumn rains and the ground is wet and soggy. Because if you can dig them out on a lovely dry day, let them dry in the sun for an hour or two so all the soil rubs off, and then store them in some breathable bags, not polythene, so hessian or paper sack somewhere cool and dark. Then you'll have your lovely potatoes right the way through the winter months. Pelargoniums, we grow a few pelargoniums, often known as geraniums, and they're coming to the end now. The flowers are looking a bit tatty. So if you want to keep them for next year, you can dig them out the ground if you've got them in containers, pop them in some smallish pots, cut them back, and just keep them somewhere light and frost-free. If you've got a windowsill in a spare room or somewhere that, as long as it's frost-free, that's all they need on the dry side. And take a few cuttings as well. And that's something we're going to be doing, taking some cuttings off ours, and then we can get new plants for next year. So, it's all about saving a bit of money in the garden. The more we save in the garden, the faster we can get out there to Longwood Gardens.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sure.
Via Massachusetts and
Exactly,
where else, Logan.
Exactly. And then the other thing is, as I mentioned last week, our courgette plants have just been tinged by that really early frost we got in the middle of the month, which is early for us. And the courgettes have pretty much finished, but we left a few courgettes on to turn into marrows, because a courgette and a marrow are the same. Courgette is just essentially a baby marrow. So we left them on, and I just I've got one here, and I know this is being videoed for those watching, but for those that are only listening to the audio
on the podcast, he's just gone off mic because he's got to lift this big marrow.
A little courgette turned into marrow. It's got to be at least 60 centimetres long,
maybe,
2 feet,
20, 24 inches. That definitely,
easily, isn't it? So, Jill, this is for you actually.
Well, we do have more than that one, so I wondered if Sean would like it. To be honest,
if he wants one.
Okay, do I have to answer on mic?
You don't. You have to commit. But if you are growing them and you harvest them out garden, what you need to do is, if you want to
why is the wind coming on?
Exactly. It's like a lot of courgettes and marrows. They need to what we call cure. So if you want to store them, because lots of people store them and then eat them through the winter, but you need the skin to go hard. On a courgette, it's soft. On a marrow, it needs to go hard. So you shouldn't be able to push your thumbnail into it. So I'm now pushing to the skin, and that is rock hard. But also when you tap it,
oh yeah!
See, that is just like knocking on a piece of wood. So that tells me that is ripe, or as we call it, cured. And again, in a nice cool shed or garage, not anywhere too warm, otherwise it will wither away. So it needs to be cool. That will keep, right the way through until Christmas or beyond. So I don't know I've got quite a few of these, Jill.
Yes.
It was that knocking on it that puts me off it, if I'm honest.
Really?
But inside it's nice, is it?
Yeah, it's got a hard skin, but the flesh is soft.
The flesh is soft.
What can you do with it?
Well, marrow, no, it has a really mild flavour, but what marrow flesh is quite good at is absorbing other flavours.
Oh, God, it's heavy, isn't it? It's a lot of weight to that. It's a lot of heft. Oh my God!
But a lot of the weights in the skin.
I'm now doing knocking the microphone over and doing what do you call it, push-ups? No.
Yeah.
I'll put it on the table.
So the flesh is good at absorbing flavours, so it will work really well if you add it into stews or casseroles. Then it takes on all those flavours, but it gives you that bit of bulk as well. So it is quite, when it gets to this sort of size, the skin is quite hard to cut through. So you do need a really good knife and watch your fingers.
Chainsaw.
So the classic dish from the 70s, Martin and I can remember this from our childhood, is a stuffed marrow. Right. If you're a fan of Coronation Street, which is a weekly sort of soap, isn't it, on our television,
all around the world what Coronation Street is.
Deirdre Barlow was always quite famous for her stuffed marrow, so you'll remember that. But essentially, you just cut the marrow in half, make up a sort of bolognese type mixture.
Just scoop the middle
take
out.
The seeds out, take the seeds out and any of the fibrousy bits around the seeds, and then you can put that bolognese mixture in that sort of channel where the seeds were, and then just pop it in the oven, and then it will just bake.
I've got one question. Yeah. I don't think that would fit in anyone's oven.
That is a bit extreme. So what you can do instead of doing that, because it's quite a lot of baked stuffed marrow, you could cut slices. So if you cut a slice, probably 2 inches, about 10 centimetres, and then take the seeds out and then put that mixture into the hole in the middle. And then put it flat on a baking tray. Then you've got a more manageable.
That's going to feel a bit more like Gordon Ramsay looking as well.
Yes, exactly. A bit of cheese on the top as well, and just let that melt and be really nice. But because we got back from a show, and there were 1 or 2 more marrows than I had anticipated. So I thought, right, and also the greenhouse was just mass producing tomatoes and peppers, and because we've been working with aubergines at shows, we've got 4 aubergine plants, so I've got loads of aubergines as well, and they're the classic ingredients for ratatouille. So, not having much time, because we're having the kitchen done in our house, so I'm trying to empty kitchen cupboards. I haven't really got time to do a lot of cooking at the moment, so I just thought, right, we'll do a slow cooker ratatouille. So it's literally chop up if you've got any courgettes, use those, bit of marrow, so peel it, take the seeds out and chop the marrow into sort of biggish bite-sized pieces, chop up some pepper, couple of peppers, some tomatoes, just cut them in half, take the seeds out and then roughly chop those. So they're your main vegetables. Oh, and the aubergine, of course, as well. And then just fry some chunks of onion in a pan, bit of oil. Fry that until it's cooked. You can chop all the rest of the veg while that's frying. And then just add in a couple of tablespoons of tomato paste and some garlic as well. So 4 or 5 cloves of garlic, stir that together, put all your veg into your slow cooker, add in that tomatoey onion, a little bit of stock, so about 1/3 of a cup of stock, some herbs, you can put whatever you want in, a little glug of oil over the top, put the lid on the slow cooker, just let that cook 3 to 5 hours on low, 5 to 7 hours on high. That's it, and it will just cook down. All the vegetables will get nice and soft and tender. If it's a little bit runny, the sauce, then at the end of cooking time, just add in a bit of corn flour mixed with a bit of water, just to thicken it up a little bit. But top tip, with anything you're doing in a slow cooker, if you don't want it to get too runny, because often the sauce will be a bit too runny because of the steam, it all builds up on the lid, put a tea towel underneath the lid, and that will absorb some of that moisture and stop the sauce from watering down too much. Anyway, so there, ratatouille, batch it up into freezer bags, pop it in the freezer, and then we have that just on its own with some crusty bed, a bit like a soup or a vegetable stew, or you can do, it's perfect with pasta. So just cook some pasta up and stir it through some pasta. So yes, slow cooker ratatouille. That's the way forward.
I'll take one. We'll give it a go.
We've one slightly smaller if that's a little bit off.
We've just inherited a slow cooker, so maybe we can give that a go.
And you've got tomatoes. So
we've got tomatoes,
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll give that a go. Absolutely. The other thing, so again, we've mentioned we are on video for this. Hopefully this video works because we've never tried this before. But one thing people will notice if they are watching the video is it's a beautiful sunny day. It's the middle of September as we're recording this, and we left the biscuits out. And I don't know if you noticed, but the chocolate biscuits are melting, so we might have to eat them.
You might have to eat them, Sean. I noticed they're near you two, not near me.
Oh. I can't eat any more, Sean, so you're on your own. I've eaten 14 as it is.
I was just glanced across and thought, that's just going to start dripping.
I've got a figure to look after, so you're young, you can cope.
Well, next week you're going to hopefully get out to the
we're going to have some highlights from the Malvern Autumn Show, sort of the last big show of the season. So we'll be bringing highlights of that, and there'll be normal jobs and all that sort of thing. Maybe another recipe, Mrs. Fish.
Yeah, I should say that recipe will be there'll be a link to the recipe on our website on the show notes.
We'll put the link on the show notes so you can follow that and get to the website and find the recipe. So fantastic! And if you've got a bigger oven than this Marrow, do let us know. Maybe in America they have big ovens like that. Oh yeah, maybe they could barbecue it or something.
Grilling.
Yes.
Grill in America. They don't use the phrase barbecue. It's called grilling.
Yeah. We need to go. We need to experience it.
Do you think we could take that as hand luggage?
I think you might be arrested.
Might be a bit suspect.
I don't think they'd let you in. So that's it. We'll be back next week.
We'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye. Watch the videos on YouTube or Facebook, follow us on Instagram, Twitter or X, and subscribe to the podcast and never miss a thing. For more information, go to pots&trowels.com.